The exploration ship had traveled through the stars for many centuries. Its crew had mapped thousands of planets and discovered hundreds of alien species. Commander had seen wonders that would take a lifetime to describe. He had walked on worlds made entirely of crystal. He had swum through oceans of liquid metal. He had spoken with beings made of pure light. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for what he found on the small volcanic planet at the edge of the galaxy. The signal came first. It was weak and old and buried under layers of cosmic radiation. The ship's sensors almost missed it entirely. But the communication officer, a young named Al, noticed the pattern hidden in the noise. It was artificial. Someone had built a transmitter on that hostile world and sent a message into the void. Commander ordered the ship to change course. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel and approached the planet carefully. The world below them was angry and violent. Volcanoes covered the surface like open wounds. Rivers of molten rock flowed between mountains of black stone. The atmosphere was thick with ash and poison. No species known to the Galactic Council could survive on such a world. Yet the signal continued to pulse from somewhere beneath the clouds. The ship descended through the atmosphere. The hull groaned under the heat and pressure. Warning lights flashed across every console. Dr. Aura, the chief science officer, watched her instruments with growing amazement. There were structures down there. Massive domes of metal and glass rose from the volcanic plains. Cities existed where no cities should exist. The ship landed on a flat stretch of cooled lava near the largest dome. Commander led a team of 12 out of the airlock and across the barren ground. They wore environmental suits to protect them from the toxic air. Their boots crunched on the sharp black rocks. Ahead of them, a door opened in the side of the dome. Figures emerged. They walked on two legs. They had two arms. Their bodies were soft and covered in fabric. Their faces had two eyes, one nose, and one mouth. They looked fragile and weak compared to the heavily armored. Commander felt his heart stop. He recognized these beings. Every child in the Galactic Council learned about them in school. They were supposed to be extinct. They were supposed to be dead for 3,000 years. They were human. The leader of the humans stepped forward. She was a woman of middle age with brown hair streaked with gray. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She showed no fear at the sight of the alien visitors. She raised her hand in a gesture of greeting and spoke in a language that the translation devices struggled to decode. Her name was Morgan. She was the elected leader of New Haven Colony. She welcomed the visitors to their world and asked them to come inside where the air was clean and the temperature was comfortable. Commander could not refuse. He needed to understand how this was possible. He needed to know how humans had survived when the entire galaxy believed they were gone forever. The interior of the dome was beautiful. Trees grew in carefully maintained gardens. Water flowed through artificial streams. Children played on green grass under a ceiling that projected an image of a blue sky with white clouds. The humans had built a paradise inside their shell of metal and glass. Morgan led them through the city to a central building that served as the colony's government headquarters. Along the way, thousands of humans stopped to stare at the alien visitors. Some waved. Some took pictures with small handheld devices. None of them seemed afraid. Dr. Aura counted the population as they walked. She estimated that more than 2 million humans lived in this dome alone. Her scans had detected at least 50 similar structures scattered across the planet. The total population could be in the hundreds of millions. This was not a small group of survivors clinging to existence. This was a thriving civilization. Morgan invited them to sit in a large meeting room. Servants brought food and drink. The humans seemed eager to share their resources with their unexpected guests, explained the history of New Haven while they listened in stunned silence. 3,000 years ago, the ancestors of the current colonists had fled from Earth. A great war had consumed there. The details had been lost to time. All they knew was that their ancestors had launched generation ships into the unknown, hopping to find a new home among the stars. The journey had taken 500 years. Many ships had been lost along the way. When the survivors finally found this volcanic world, it seemed like a cruel joke. The planet was barely habitable, but the colonists had no choice. Their ships were failing. They had to land or die in the void. So they landed, and they survived. Generation after generation, they built their domes and tamed the volcanic energy and grew their food in artificial gardens. They believed they were the last humans in the universe. They believed they were alone. Morgan smiled at Commander. She said that his arrival was the greatest moment in their history. Now they knew that intelligent life existed beyond their small corner of the galaxy. Now they knew they were not alone. Commander did not return her smile. His mind was racing with terrible thoughts. He remembered his history lessons. He remembered what the Galactic Council had said about humanity. He remembered the official story that every citizen of the Council accepted as truth. Humans were dangerous. Humans were aggressive. Humans had destroyed themselves in a war of their own making. The Council had declared Earth a forbidden zone to prevent anyone from disturbing the remains of that violent species. But here they were, alive and peaceful and welcoming. Something did not add up. Commander excused himself and returned to his ship. He needed to report this discovery to the Galactic Council immediately. He composed a detailed message and sent it through the faster-than-light communication array. The response came within hours. A full delegation would arrive in 30 cycles. The High Arbiter himself would lead the investigation. Commander was ordered to remain on the planet and observe the humans until the delegation arrived. He was told to share nothing about galactic history with the colonists. He was told to be careful. The message ended with a phrase that made Commander feel cold despite his thick hide. The Council wrote that the situation was extremely sensitive. They wrote that the existence of surviving humans posed significant complications. Morgan found the Commander standing outside his ship that evening. She asked if everything was all right. She said he seemed troubled. She offered to answer any questions he might have about her people. Commander looked at this kind woman who led her people with wisdom and grace. He wondered what the Galactic Council was so afraid of. He wondered what secrets were hiding in the shadows of history. He told that a delegation was coming. He told her that her people would soon meet the leaders of the galactic civilization. He told her that everything would be fine. He hoped he was not lying. The Galactic Council delegation arrived exactly 30 cycles after Commander sent his report. Morgan stood on the landing field with her advisors and watched the ships descend from the orange sky. There were 7 vessels in total. 6 of them were warships bristling with weapons. The 7th was a diplomatic cruiser painted in the gold and silver colors of the Council. Cole stood behind with his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. He was the chief of security for New Haven Colony. He had spent 40 years protecting his people from volcanic eruptions and dangerous wildlife and equipment failures. He was a practical man who trusted his instincts. His instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. He leaned close to and spoke quietly. He asked why a peaceful diplomatic mission needed 6 warships as escorts. Did not answer. She was wondering the same thing. The doors of the diplomatic cruiser opened. A tall figure emerged and walked down the ramp with slow, deliberate steps. He was a light commander, but his scales were darker and his eyes were colder. He wore robes of deep purple that marked him as a member of the highest council authority. His name was High Arbiter. He greeted Morgan with formal words and empty courtesy. He said the council was fascinated by the discovery of surviving humans. He said they wished to learn everything about New Haven and its people. He said the council came in peace and friendship. Cole watched the Arbiter's eyes as he spoke. The alien's face showed no emotion. His words said one thing, but his manner said another. Had interrogated enough criminals in his career to recognize a liar when he saw one. The delegation spent the following days touring the colony. They visited the agricultural domes where humans grew food in soil imported from Earth centuries ago. They inspected the geothermal power plants that converted volcanic heat into electricity. They observed the schools where children learned reading and mathematics and the history of their lost. Dr. Price accompanied the alien scientists during their inspections. He was the head of research for New Haven Colony. He was proud of what his people had accomplished and eager to share their knowledge with the galaxy. He explained how humans had adapted their technology to survive on such a hostile world. He showed them medical advances that had extended human to nearly 200 years. He demonstrated engineering techniques that allowed structures to withstand constant earthquakes and volcanic activity. The scientists took careful notes. They asked many questions. They seemed impressed but also disturbed. Dr. Price noticed that they exchanged worried glances whenever he described a new human achievement. He wondered why discovery and innovation seemed to frighten them. Meanwhile, a young engineer named Shaw was working on a routine repair in the colony's communication center. She was fixing a damaged relay that connected the various domes across the planet. It was boring work that required patience and attention to detail, had both qualities in abundance. As she worked, her diagnostic equipment picked up a strange signal. It was an encrypted transmission traveling between the Council delegation and their ships in orbit. Knew she should ignore it. The aliens were guests of the colony. Their private communications were none of her business. But curiosity was a powerful force in human nature. Ran the signal through her decryption software. The codes were complex but not unbreakable. After 2 hours of work, she managed to extract fragments of the message. The words she read made her blood run cold. She found references to something called the Extinction Protocol. She found warnings about the inherent danger of the human species. She found discussions about containment and elimination and permanent solutions. She found a recommendation that the Council fleet remain in orbit and await further orders. Abandoned her repair work and ran through the corridors of the dome. She needed to find Morgan immediately. She needed to warn her people before it was too late. She found in her office reviewing trade proposals with the Council delegation. Cole was standing guard at the door, pushed past him and burst into the room. She was breathing hard and her face was pale with fear. Dismissed the Council representatives with polite excuses. When the room was empty, she turned to and asked what was wrong, handed over her and showed the decoded messages. Cole read the fragments over shoulder. His face became hard and grim. He had survived decades of danger by trusting his instincts. His instincts had been right about the delegation from the start. Studied the messages for a long time. She did not panic. She did not rage. She simply absorbed the information and began to think. The Galactic Council had not come to welcome humanity back into the cosmic community. They had come to assess a threat. They had come to decide whether humans should be allowed to exist. She asked to continue monitoring the Council communications. She told to quietly increase security around the key facilities of the colony. She decided not to tell the general population yet. There was no reason to cause panic until they understood the full situation. High Arbiter requested a meeting with the following morning. He asked permission to access the colony's historical archives. He specifically wanted to examine the records from the generation ships that had brought the original settlers to this world. He said the Council was interested in preserving human history for the galactic records. Agreed to his request. She had her own reasons for wanting to examine those ancient files. Her grandmother had once told her that secrets were buried in the generation ship databases, secrets that the founders of New Haven had deliberately hidden from their descendants. Perhaps those secrets could explain why the Galactic Council saw humanity as a threat. Dr. Price was assigned to work with the archivists on the project. The old records were stored in data formats that modern computers struggled to read. The work would take time and patience. Was happy to help. He still believed that cooperation with the Council could lead to a bright future for humanity. Knew better now. She understood that the future of her people hung by a thread. One wrong move could bring those warships down from orbit. One mistake could end the human species forever. She looked out the window of her office at the children playing in the artificial gardens below. They laughed and ran and lived their small, happy lives without knowing the danger that surrounded them, made a silent promise to protect them. She would find a way to save her people. She would uncover the truth about humanity's past and use it to secure humanity's future. Whatever secrets the old archives contained, she was ready to face them. The ancient data cores from the generation ships were stored in a vault deep beneath the central dome. No one had accessed them in over 1,000 years. The original colonists had built the vault to preserve their history, but somewhere along the way, the knowledge of what it contained had been lost. The people of New Haven knew only that the vault existed, and that opening it required special authorization. Dr. Price led the archivists down the long elevator shaft to the vault level. The air was cool and dry, perfect for preserving delicate electronics. Rows of black storage units lined the walls like silent monuments to a forgotten age. Dust covered everything. No footprints marked the floor. Felt a sense of awe as he walked among the ancient machines. These devices had traveled across the stars 3,000 years ago. They contained the memories and records of the original settlers. They held the answers to questions that humans had wondered about for generations. They were less impressed. They moved through the vault with cold efficiency, scanning each storage unit and cataloging its contents. High Arbiter had given them specific instructions. They were looking for something particular in these old files. They did not share that information with their human guide. The work took many days. Most of the data was routine. Passenger manifests listed the names of families who had fled Earth. Engineering logs described the endless repairs needed to keep the ships functioning during the long voyage. Agricultural records documented early attempts to grow food in artificial environments. Personal journals captured the hopes and fears of ordinary people facing an uncertain future. But buried deep within the corrupted files, Dr. Price discovered something unusual. A sealed partition existed within the main database. It was protected by encryption far more advanced than anything else in the archive. More importantly, it required a genetic key to access. Someone had designed the lock to open only for a specific bloodline. The archivists immediately reported this discovery to High Arbiter. The Arbiter came to the vault himself to examine the sealed partition. His cold eyes studied the genetic lock with intense interest. He asked Dr. Price who among the current colonists might carry the required genetic signature. Did not know the answer, but Morgan did. When she learned about the sealed partition, felt something click into place. Her grandmother had spoken of family secrets passed down through generations. Her grandmother had said that the Morgan family carried a responsibility that dated back to the founding of the colony, had always assumed these were just stories. Now she understood they were something more. She descended to the vault and placed her hand on the genetic scanner. The machine hummed as it analyzed her blood. Lights flashed across the ancient interface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the seal broke. The hidden partition opened. 3,000 years of buried truth spilled across the display screens. Read the files with growing horror. Dr. Price stood beside her, his face turning pale as the true history of humanity revealed itself. Even High Arbiter seemed shaken by what the records contained. Humanity had not destroyed itself. The Great War that consumed Earth had not been a civil conflict. It had been an invasion. 3,000 years ago, the Galactic Council had declared humanity an existential threat to galactic civilization. The Council's scientists had studied human biology and behavior for decades. They had concluded that humans were unlike any other species in the known galaxy. Humans possessed the ability to adapt and evolve at an unprecedented rate. Diseases that killed other species for millions of years could be overcome by humans within mere generations. Environments that were hostile to all known life could be conquered by human ingenuity within centuries. The Council's predictive models had painted a terrifying picture. If humanity was allowed to expand beyond Earth, they would eventually dominate the entire galaxy. Every other civilization would be absorbed or outcompeted. The Council believed they had no choice. They voted to eliminate humanity before it could become a threat. The extermination fleet had arrived without warning. Billions of humans died in the first wave of attacks. Cities were reduced to ash. Oceans were boiled away. The survivors fought back with desperate courage, but their weapons were primitive compared to Council technology. The war lasted 30 years. Humanity refused to surrender. They refused to die quietly. They built weapons from wreckage and fought with stones when the weapons ran out. They made the Council pay for every inch of ground with rivers of alien blood. In the end, the Council believed they had won. Earth was reduced to a burned and poisoned wasteland. No human life signs remained. The Council declared the planet a forbidden zone and erased humanity from galactic records. They taught their children that humans were a violent species that had destroyed itself. They buried the truth so deep that even most Council members forgot what really happened. But they had not killed everyone. A small fleet of generation ships had escaped during the final battles. They fled into the darkest regions of space, traveling for 500 years until they found this volcanic world at the edge of the galaxy. The survivors had landed and built New Haven and raised children who knew nothing of the genocide that had nearly ended their species. The founders of the colony had sealed this knowledge away deliberately. They believed that if their descendants ever encountered the Galactic Council again, ignorance might protect them. They hoped that humanity would be seen as innocent newcomers rather than survivors of an attempted genocide. Morgan finished reading the files and turned to face High Arbiter. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was steady. She asked him if it was true. She asked him if the Council had tried to murder her entire species. The Arbiter did not deny it. He said the Council had done what was necessary to protect galactic civilization. He said the threat models had been clear. He said humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to spread among the stars. Cole's hand moved toward his weapon. Dr. Price grabbed his arm and stopped him. Violence would not help them now. 6 warships still orbited above their heads. The colony had no weapons that could match Council technology. Asked the Arbiter what would happen next. She asked if the Council intended to finish what they had started 3,000 years ago. High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Then he said that the matter would be decided by the full Council. He said he would make his recommendation based on his observations of New Haven. He said the people of this colony should prepare themselves for any outcome. He turned and walked out of the vault, leaving the humans alone with their terrible knowledge. Looked at and knew that preparing for any outcome was exactly what they needed to do. The Colony Leadership Council gathered in an emergency session that night. Morgan told them everything she had learned in the vault. She showed them the ancient records and explained the true history of humanity's near extinction. She described the threat that now orbited above their world in the form of 6 Council warships. The Council members reacted with shock and anger and fear. Some wanted to attack the delegation immediately before they could call for reinforcements. Others wanted to surrender and beg for mercy. A few suggested fleeing into the volcanic wilderness and hiding until the danger passed. Cole stood at the front of the room and waited for the chaos to settle. When the Council finally fell silent, he spoke in his calm, steady voice. He said that running would not save them. He said that begging would not save them either. He said that the Council had tried to destroy humanity once and failed. They would not fail again if given the chance. The only option was to fight, not with weapons, because they could not win a military conflict against the Council fleet, but there were other ways to fight. There were other weapons besides guns and missiles. Shaw was the first to volunteer her skills. She had spent her career building machines that could survive impossible conditions. She knew the mining equipment of the colony better than anyone. Those massive drilling lasers were designed to cut through solid rock at incredible temperatures. They could be modified to target ships in orbit. The electromagnetic shields that protected the domes from solar radiation could be weaponized into pulse generators that might disable Council electronics. She did not promise victory. She only promised that humanity would not die quietly a second time. Dr. Price offered a different kind of contribution. During the cultural exchange with he had collected samples of their biological data. He had studied their physiology and compared it to human biology. What he found was remarkable and potentially decisive. They had virtually no immune system compared to humans. Their bodies had evolved on a sterile world where disease was almost unknown. They had never faced the constant biological warfare that shaped life on Earth. Human bodies were designed to fight off millions of hostile microorganisms every day. Bodies had no such defenses. Explained that humans had been breathing the same recycled air for weeks. Human bacteria and viruses had already begun spreading through the delegation. Most of these microorganisms were harmless to humans, but they could be devastating. He was not suggesting they weaponize this knowledge. He was not proposing biological warfare. He was simply pointing out a fact that the Council might not have considered. If they attacked New Haven and killed every human, the returning ships would carry human microbes back to worlds. The plagues that followed could kill billions. Humanity could not be eliminated without consequence. They were too deeply connected to the web of life to be removed cleanly. Destroying them would unleash chaos across the galaxy. Morgan understood the power of this information. It was not a threat, it was a truth, and sometimes truth was the most powerful weapon of all. She called for a colony-wide broadcast. Every screen in every dome across the planet displayed her face as she spoke to her people. She told them the history that had been hidden for 3,000 years. She told them about the genocide and the flight and the survival of their ancestors. She told them that the Galactic Council had returned to judge whether humanity deserved to exist. The response from the colonists was not fear, it was defiance. Humans had survived volcanic winters and equipment failures and food shortages and plagues. They had carved a civilization out of hellish rock through nothing but stubborn refusal to give up. They were not going to surrender now. They were not going to apologize for being what they were. Workers abandoned their normal jobs and reported to Shaw for instructions. Within hours, teams of engineers were modifying the mining lasers and reconfiguring the shield generators. They worked around the clock without rest. They welded and wired and programmed with the focused energy of people who knew their survival depended on their efforts. Cole organized the security forces into defensive positions throughout the colony. Every dome was prepared for siege. Every tunnel was rigged with traps. If the Council wanted to take New Haven, they would pay for it with blood. High Arbiter watched these preparations through surveillance drones that his staff had planted throughout the colony. He was troubled by what he saw. The threat models had described humanity as aggressive and dangerous, but they had also predicted that humans would be primitive and disorganized. The colonists of New Haven were neither. He composed his preliminary report to the Council and hesitated before sending it. The Council had asked him to recommend whether the extinction protocol should be implemented. The expected answer was yes. The safe answer was yes, but something in his conscience made him pause. He had walked among these people. He had seen their gardens and their schools and their hospitals. He had watched their children play without fear. He had observed their kindness toward alien visitors who might be planning their destruction. They were not the monsters described in the ancient records. Perhaps the ancient records were wrong. The Council's response arrived before could complete his report. The full assembly had voted to implement the extinction protocol against the human colony. The warships in orbit were ordered to begin bombardment within 20 cycles. The decision was final and could not be appealed. Felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had been too slow. He had waited too long to voice his doubts. Now millions of innocent beings would die because the Council was afraid of what they might become. He requested a meeting with Morgan. He told her the Council's decision. He expected her to rage or weep or beg. Instead, she simply nodded and asked if he would grant her one final audience before the bombardment began. She had something to show him, something that might change his mind about everything. Agreed to the meeting. He did not believe anything could alter the Council's decision, but he felt he owed these people the courtesy of listening before they died. He did not realize that Morgan had never lost a negotiation in her life. Morgan met High Arbiter in the observation deck of the colony's central tower. The room had walls of transparent glass that looked out over the volcanic plains. Rivers of molten rock glowed orange in the distance. Plumes of ash rose from distant mountains. It was a view of hell that humans had transformed into a home. She had brought Dr. Price with her. She had asked Cole to wait outside. This was not a meeting for soldiers. This was a meeting for people who could still be reasoned with. Stood with his hands clasped behind his back and his eyes fixed on the harsh landscape. He did not turn when entered. He spoke first and asked if she had brought weapons. He said he would understand if she had. He said he might deserve it. Told him she had brought something more dangerous than weapons. She had brought the truth. She gestured to, who activated a display screen on the wall. Charts and graphs appeared showing biological data. Explained what he had discovered about the differences between human and immune systems. He described how human microorganisms had already spread throughout the delegation during their weeks of cultural exchange. He explained that human bacteria and viruses were now living inside every member of the Council team. Most of these organisms were harmless to humans. They were part of the natural biology that every human carried from birth, but bodies had no experience with such things. They had no defenses. If the Council fleet attacked New Haven and killed every human, the delegation would return to their carrying human microbes. Those microbes would spread through populations that had never encountered disease. The plagues that followed would be catastrophic. Billions could die across dozens of worlds. Was careful to explain that this was not a threat. Humans had not engineered this situation deliberately. It was simply biology. It was the natural consequence of two species sharing the same air. Humanity could not be eliminated without destroying those who eliminated them. The survivors of the genocide would carry the seeds of their own destruction back to their homes. Listened in silence. His face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled slightly at his sides. He asked if this was blackmail. He asked if humanity was holding the galaxy hostage to save themselves. Shook her head. She said it was not blackmail. It was a simple statement of fact. Humans and were now connected in ways that could not be severed. Destroying one would harm the other. The only path forward was coexistence. She walked to the window and stood beside the Arbiter. She pointed to the domes scattered across the volcanic plain. She told him about the people who lived in those domes. She described farmers who had spent generations learning to grow crops in alien soil. She spoke of teachers who educated children in a language that no one else in the galaxy could speak. She mentioned artists who painted pictures of a blue sky that none of them had ever seen. Her people did not want to dominate the galaxy. They did not want to outcompete or absorb other civilizations. They simply wanted to live. They wanted to raise their children and build their communities and explore the universe that had been closed to them for 3,000 years. They wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. The Council had feared what humanity might become, but the Council had never taken the time to see what humanity actually was. It was quiet for a long time. He watched the children playing in the gardens below the tower. He observed workers returning from their shifts in the power plants. He saw elderly couples walking hand in hand through artificial parks. He saw life in all its ordinary wonder. He thought about the threat models that had predicted human domination of the galaxy. He thought about the ancient fears that had driven the Council to attempt genocide. He thought about the reports he had sent describing humanity as a danger to be eliminated. He thought about how wrong all of those assessments might have been. The next 3 weeks were the most tense in the history of New Haven. Council warships remained in orbit with their weapons powered and ready. The colony's improvised defenses hummed with energy. Neither side wanted to fire the first shot, but neither side was willing to stand down. Spent those weeks in constant communication with. She did not argue or threaten. She simply talked to him about human life. She shared stories about her grandmother and her childhood and her hopes for the future. She introduced him to ordinary colonists who told him about their families and their dreams. She showed him that humans were not monsters to be feared, but people to be understood. Cole watched these conversations from his post at the door. He saw the Arbiter's cold demeanor slowly change. The alien had arrived expecting to find terrifying predators. Instead, he found teachers and doctors and engineers. He found people who had built a civilization from nothing through sheer determination. He found kindness where he had expected cruelty. On the 22nd day of the standoff, sent a new report to the Galactic Council. It was unlike any report he had ever written. It contradicted 3,000 years of official doctrine. It challenged the foundational beliefs of galactic civilization. He wrote that humanity was not a threat to be eliminated. They were a resource to be embraced. Their adaptive biology could revolutionize medicine across 100 worlds. Their engineering ingenuity could solve problems that had puzzled other species for. Their stubborn refusal to surrender could inspire civilizations that had grown complacent and stagnant. He recommended that the Extinction Protocol be suspended. He requested that New Haven be granted provisional membership in the galactic community. He staked his entire career on the belief that cooperation was better than destruction. The Council debated for 6 days. Some members demanded that the original order be carried out. Others were swayed by arguments. In the end, the vote was close, but the suspension passed. The warships broke orbit and departed. New Haven was safe. Stood on the observation deck and watched the Council fleet disappear into the stars. Cole stood beside her with a rare smile on his weathered face. Behind them, the people of the colony celebrated with singing and dancing and tears of relief. It was not a perfect ending. Trust between humanity and the galaxy would take generations to build. There would be factions who never accepted the decision. The secrets of the past would eventually become public knowledge, and the political consequences would shake civilizations across the stars. But for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity was no longer alone. They had survived genocide and exile and the judgment of an entire galaxy. They had proven that the human spirit could not be extinguished by fear or violence or time. Looked up at the stars that had been forbidden to her people for so long. Those stars were waiting, and humanity was finally ready to take its place among them.